Aquele texto.
Ok.
Mas não aparece ali, pois não? Está ligado.
Hello. So we will start now the session of synthesis. We have here our relators, these people who have been taking notes of the discussion of the small groups. And we will start with group A. So it will be Tiago Mendes, here in my right, who will start. Each one of them have 5 minutes. And they prepare a slide with the synthesis of the 5 key ideas have been discussed in each one of the groups. And after this presentation, we'll have a small dialogue just to try to see similarities or differences between the discussions among the groups. So to not lose time, I will just ask Tiago to start with his synthesis report. Thank you very much.
Sim. Pronto, desde já desculpa talvez pela confusão das ideias, mas realmente é muito estímulo para processarem. É muito estímulo para processar em 10 minutos. Vou então falar em português, também peço desculpa, mas é mais fácil de organizar as ideias. Então a primeira ideia...
But it is easier to organize the ideas. So the first idea is the impact. Is the impact of the pandemic crisis, or the impact that the pandemic crisis originated in the audiences, namely the fear of participating. We mentioned specifically the older population that tended to distance themselves from the spectacles. At the same time, you know, this breaking point can, in fact, bring a renewal of this situation concerning the pandemic crisis. Second aspect, we are the audiences. I mean, we're speaking about participation, but we also participate. We can identify also our needs, interests, and longings, and that perception that we have of ourselves individually and collectively contributes to the understanding of what we want to do. We want dialogue, we want participation, and also we also mentioned the interest that we may have I'm sorry, says the speaking, with regards to the pandemic crisis, we mentioned the interest of actually helping artists themselves. We understood that the ecosystem of the arts is something we are part of as well, and we contribute to that ecosystem as well. The third aspect, the need for listening and the need to understand that the arts impact on the well-being of people, and we mentioned physical well-being, mental well-being, and with this, and that this well-being is even more stimulated when we listen to people, when people feel that they are an active part of things, and in that case that physical and psychological well-being is something that is further emphasized, and this can represent an area of interest for public policies. Nevertheless, there is always a trap of looking into arts as an instrument, but we should recognize to have the global value it has. Also, along these lines, culture is something that requires collaboration with other sectors. Listening is not just listening to audiences, but rather listening to other sectors, health, education, and so on. A fourth aspect, the role of artists. It is very interesting to understand that artists also have responsibilities in this promotion of the participation, and here we have a considerable paradox, which is the one between artistic autonomy. They can do whatever they want, and that needs to be safeguarded, but at the same time we have a challenge regarding their work, the way the art is produced, and that should be done in an inclusive manner and be close to people. So there is a paradox between comfort and discomfort. Comfort to attract audiences, and the discomfort that should also be part or be felt by those that are enjoying the art and participating. And last, what can be the entering points, these points that make people become closer, more involved in participating. One thing has to do with education. I cannot resist this, says the author. We usually say that, things start when you are young. So this is something that we can promote from a very young age, but other entering points could be, the experience of being present, and also the idea of actually seducing, captivating audiences. We need to have good strategies to involve them and then challenge them. Thank you very much for being able to make a summary of what your group discussed. Please be kind to speak slowly.
Who will just do the synthesis. Please, João, you have the floor.
Olá a todos.
Hello everyone. It is not easy to make a summary of so many ideas. Anyway, we focus ourselves on the participation, and we put aside the issue of peripheries. We divided our key ideas in 5 different aspects. On the one hand, the purpose. Participation can be used for fostering agency and capacity. We started to think about empowerment, and this we then decided to forget this word, because more than empowerment, people need to have the capacity or the skills, and for participation to actually happen, one needs to have skills. So it is an end, but it is also a means. With regards to the difficulties, we pointed out many of them. We pointed out failures, lacks of success. We have many difficulties. It starts with planning and designing participatory processes, also involving artists and communities. It has a weak or limited reach. It is difficult to anyway involve people in the process, and in this case we spoke of need versus offer, and who exactly is looking for this participation, whether this happens, on the side of agents, artists, or communities. The third aspect had to do with the conditions for participation. A very important aspect is to actually balance bottom-up and top-down procedures. Both are present in participatory procedures, and they are both required. But we have a set of other conditions that are also relevant. We need to listen to people, to their history. As somebody said just a while ago, there is, this need to train specific skills, such as mediation. An important aspect is to know well territories and their realities, so that participation may in fact happen and be effective. To know very well the agents that are involved and people and their realities. Then, regarding results, we emphasize the ambivalence and complexity vis-à-vis results, and also the complexity when assessing these results. On the other hand, and to conclude, we also thought about many words that correspond to the need of having an effective participation. One of them is continuity. Time was mentioned as a key factor in these processes. Continuity, monitoring, even when a project reaches the end. This sometimes does not happen, and this may lead to failures in the impacts that we wanted to achieve. Skills, I've mentioned that earlier. With regards to resources, it has to do not only with cultural agents, but also with political institutions involved and specific cultural policies or other policies. We also thought about and this has to do with democracy, the possibility of these processes being actually able to change the form, the way we design or decide, at least internally within the associations that developed participatory processes. Last, I would like to emphasize that participation is difficult. Sometimes it cannot be implemented in each and every context unless some basic rights are guaranteed. In this case, freedom of choice versus basic rights, and this as a condition for participation to actually occur. Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's give the floor now to Anna. Good afternoon, everyone. It is not easy to make a summary in so little time, but in fact in this group we had more questions than answers. However, we were able to identify 5 main issues. And we started with the issue of participatory practices. Aren't they a new space or a new field that goes beyond the old dichotomy between art for the sake of art, or art with a social purpose, or with another purpose? And this can be connected also with what we mentioned here this morning regarding subjectivity. Maybe participatory practice is a part of this new space, and this does not need to be defined, limited, or categorized. Another idea, and I forgot to say that our group focused essentially on the issue and the concept of participation, as this happened also in Jean's group. And to speak about participation means to widen the range of those that actually have the conditions to create. We spoke about cultural democracy, not only meaning that those that are or that live in peripheral regions need to have access to cultural results, but they also need to have the possibility to actually create them. Another issue related to participation was who actually wants to participate, who has this wish to participate and to develop participation. Are we speaking of communities, cultural institutions, political actors, actors such as us, from academia? A fourth issue, and this one is really a question: how can we democratize cultural institutions? And furthermore, what kind of institutions do we want to have in 20 years' time? Do we want to have cultural institutions that want to captivate and to involve new publics, besides the one that they are used to having? Will these cultural institutions have conditions to actually do that? Will they know how to do it? And something that connects obviously to this is whether this process of transformation of cultural institution isn't also a need when it comes to the preservation of those associations. For instance, I give you the example of opera, probably a more conventional institution where publics that attend this kind of equipment are especially older audiences, and when they stop attending these type of equipments, I mean, what is it that is going to happen? Should this equipment not be concerned with capturing other audiences? And then something else that is connected to the previous items, and really depending on the objectives of those that are the purposes of institutions, of communities, of political actors, of people individually. What kind of methods and strategies or tools can in fact be used to increase participation? Thank you. Thank you very much, Anna. Now, group D with Hugo. Good afternoon, everyone. I should probably start speaking about, the idea that we had intentionally to speak about education, democracy, and periphery, but as this was a good process of participation, this kind of fell apart, and it makes the issue of reporting to you a bit more difficult. Now, initially, we started to reflect on participation and in the liturgic meaning of this word. Are we speaking of a trend or something that is an instrument? Is this the political idea of participation, and these several interpretations that may be done vis-à-vis political participation of civic powers and political as an policies as an instrument, and we also discussed that as part of participation. As a participant, we can be either active or passive participants, and it is very important to understand these perspectives. We touched on several aspects, namely the different generations, whether they feel at ease with this or not. We mentioned the pandemic that in some way resulted in a blockage in certain age groups with regards to the participation, and then we tried to evolve to this rationale of democracy. We had questions along these lines, and participation as an empowering process, and to actually giving voice. And this was very much the most used expression that was used. It is to give voice and to actually give the opportunity of third parties to express themselves, meaning ourselves, others, and to promote active listeners, people that are actually ready and capable of participating via listening. I mean, we mentioned so many things. I'm sorry for those to those in my group. I mean, last we spoke, and this had an important weight in our discussion on the need to have time, and what time means for participatory processes, and that participation should be understood as a long-term thing. You know, it takes a generation. We need to understand the effects, the causes, the impacts. I mean, and we need several processes at the same time, and this is important politically speaking, and also in education and pedagogical processes, so that participation becomes effectively a model, a process, a tool of actually acting. We ended speaking about peripheries. This was a very fast mention to peripheries, but we reflected on the way population can actually act in peripheral areas, and this once again is by giving voice to those people, and participation plays a role on this, and this is how we ended our reflection. Thank you very much, Hugo.
Boa tarde mais uma vez. É interessante que o...
Good afternoon once again. Well, we started by discussing on this relationship between center and peripheries, and we thought that this was probably reproducing a speech on this binomial. As part of our discussion, we mentioned that this is something that is built socially and politically. It depends very much on individual perspective, our position in society, and also our condition of being privileged, and we focused ourselves on this condition of being privileged as a central concern that we have, and this is very much connected to participation, participatory procedures, or processes rather, and our participation in society. We reflected on what is center and periphery, who has the power to define, and those that define this relationship are those that have the voice and that are not afraid of consequences. of that power, of their actions, of their discourse. We also reflected on the beginning and end of peripheries, whether a periphery can be connected to a network that feeds itself, whether a periphery could be the center of other peripheries, and once again whether it depends on the perspective, be it of geographical nature, aesthetic, or gender. We also reflected where we have contexts in which this binomial between center and peripheries does not exist, and this is also connected to participation. To conclude, I mean, what is it that we want to obtain with this this course, you know, between center and periphery, whether we want to continue to have this dichotomy, whether we want peripheries to become centers, or whether we want to abolish peripheries, very simply. Well, thank you very much.
Top, because they were able to synthesize in the even less minutes that we gave them. So fantastic. Thank you very much for your... And this is an expression of the richness of the debate. I think what we have been listening here is, and I have been just moving myself from one room to another, just listening a little bit, I think the debate has been very rich, and in a way, what we saw is the capacity to go from the micro to the macro. So being able to start from a diagnosis of what is happening. I must say that in some moments we were very honest about ourselves because we talk mainly about failures, not really about success, but we have been able to learn from the failure in order to build strategies and in order to build as well recommendations. And in some groups, that was also very important, no? The idea that, okay, we are able to do diagnosis, we are able to understand strategies and to try to build strategies and also to build recommendations. And something which was very interesting, in one of the groups, they were talking about which kind of cultural venues and projects we want for the next 20 years. So the idea of analyzing today's situation, of course, the pandemic is always still present in our debate, in the consequences of what we are doing, but always with this perspective, this capacity of having a prognosis analysis. So I think this is as well very, very important. No? So I think in a way the connection between participation analysis and strategies and the center-periphery approach has been very complementary in the sense that giving the voice, which is the title of our conference, is in the core of both approaches, is in the core of thinking that we are building new center from the peripheries, but as well the idea that participation is not a trend, and that was one of the words which was in one of the results. It's not just a trend. It might be a trend as well, but the important is to be able to understand that is a need that we can transform as a possibility both for artists and for citizens. In an idea which I think was this morning very clear in the speech by Marcia Tiburi, when we talk about democracy. We have a responsibility as cultural projects and events and venues in relation to our society. And this is not an instrumentalization of art and culture for achieving political or social impact kind of realities, but it is in the core of the cultural experience in itself. And that's why, and I remember that I was in the group A And Luca was saying in this very moment that now, after many years of doing this participatory campaign, there are many artists who are just proposing him proposals, artistic proposals, from an artistic point of view, not because we are asking them, oh, we are looking for that, but because many artists feel this as a new way of expression. And I think this is very interesting, and that's something that we can share with our colleagues everywhere. So the challenge is how we transform our own experience to something we could disseminate through our networks to many more people, not as a pilot exercise who receive funds from Creative Europe program, but as something which creates a new understanding, a new role for the cultural sector. So that's a little bit my own personal synthesis of what we have been listening here. So I think that what we will do now, which we will present the book, which is the result, the fourth book of the project perspective, and later we have this dialogue with Hugo Cruz, you will see that there is a lot of continuity on all what we will do in the next, not just today, but in the next days. So thank you very much indeed. We are in time, it's incredible. So I thought that only happens on Zoom meetings, not on on-site meetings. So maybe we learn something from this pandemic situation. So thank you very much for all of you, and please, thanks for the good job. So we move to the next slot, which is presentation of the book.